welcome everybody to our session this morning. Richard should be allowing people in at this moment in time, but techUK is putting this session on as part of London Tech Week, and we are delighted to be a partner with the UK's flagship tech event. And I stress the UK's flagship tech event because London Tech Week is not all about London. There is so much going on in the tech sector in the UK, and we're about to hear about some of that this morning. I'm Matt Robinson, Head of Nations and Regions for techUK. I lead on a lot of techUK's work with our members of the Nations and Regions. I work with devolved governments, with combined authorities, elected mayors and others, but particularly interested in levelling up and what levelling up can do for communities, what it can do for business and the opportunities that it presents to people. And I'm delighted that we have a stellar lineup for you this morning. So without any further ado, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, and I'm going to bring in Blake first.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Blake Bauer. I'm the Director of Digital and Tech Policy at DCMS, the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. And that means I have various responsibilities, including the digital strategy, which we published yesterday. I was delighted to see that out there in the public. I'm responsible for tech policy generally, so how we make the UK the best place to start and grow a tech business. And then I have various policy responsibilities related to regulation for technology, artificial intelligence, and digital competition.
Just a few things on your plate, Blake, at the moment.
Indeed.
Thank you, Blake. I'll bring in Sheila next.
Oh, thank you, Matt. And hi, everyone. My name is Sheila Flavel, and I'm Chief Operating Officer of FDM Group. I'm also President-elect of techUK, and I'm a member of the newly formed Digital Skills Council. So I come today with many hats. My background, I was state school educated, the first in my family to attend university, brought up in a small, very unconnected village in Scotland. And I've spent the last 30 years ensuring that FDM is a company where everyone is welcome, regardless of the background and the current status. What we say is, if you see it, you can be it. So I'm looking forward to this morning's session, to being able to contribute in anything to do with skills, Matt.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sheila. I'll come to Selene next.
Thank you and good morning. I'm Selene Saxby. I'm the MP for North Devon. I'm also chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for broadband and digital comms, which I think is probably why I'm here this morning, and techUK, very kindly our secretariat. I am not an expert in broadband, but it was the #1 issue on the doorsteps of North Devon after Brexit in the 2019 general election. So I've become something of an expert on rural broadband, particularly. So that's my main reason for being here today. But I was actually a maths teacher at the time of my election. So I am also very passionate about skills.
Thank you, Selene, and thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. We're aware how busy things are in Parliament at the moment. And our final speaker today, and I'm delighted that it's also somebody who comes from the great city of Leeds, is Anna. I'll bring in Anna.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all having a wonderful tech week down in London. I am sat here in the sunny city of Leeds. I am Chief Executive and co-founder of a company called The Data Shed. We're a data consultancy based in Leeds, working with clients from all over the country and some international, helping them understand what data they have and how they can use it to drive better action and insight. So I'm very much looking forward to this morning's conversation.
Thank you, Anna. Before we get started with our questions and going to our panel, just for those viewing at home, we've got a series of questions that I'll be posing to the panel that we've taken up based on what's in the Levelling Up white paper and some of the pressing issues around the digital agenda. There's then a question and answer opportunity for those who are viewing. So please post your questions in the chat. I'll try and look for any of where there's themes, where there's trends, and I'll pose them to our panel as well. So without any further ado, let's jump into the questions. The Levelling Up white paper was explicit in its ambition about delivering nationwide gigabit capable broadband 4G coverage, 5G coverage for the majority of the population by 2030. And we've got to ask ourselves, is 20 for 30 moving fast enough? And how will hard to reach communities reap the benefits? And it only seems fair that I come to Selene Saxby first to talk about that and maybe think about what that means for rural areas in particular. So Selene.
Thank you, Matt. And I guess I feel 2030 is too far away. And in Devon and Somerset, we have our own particular unique issues with connecting Devon and Somerset, as I frequently say, haven't actually connected either Devon or Somerset. And so we are a long way behind the curve. We're about 5 years behind the rest of the country with our commercial rollout. And the way that the rural rollout is going and where we're coming outside in is just creating a large amount of overlap. And unfortunately, when the ambition was rolled back from 100% to 85%, we are the missing 15%, is very much how it seems to be. And at the moment, there are not, in my mind, plans that are going to deliver that. I'm assured by BDUK that that's not the case. And that there's lots of work going on and that it is all going to join up. But certainly what we're seeing is a lot of over-fibering where we've got the commercial rollout has gone through places, through community fibre partnerships and other schemes. And actually BDUK seem to not be aware of this, or the programme, it's not in fairness BDUK, the programme that's running through Connecting Devon and Somerset. So we have some villages which can often have 4 different fibre providers in them, which, given that engineers is something of a shortage to actually the rollout, I find a little bewildering. And what's even more frustrating, having spent a lot of time digging into what's going on, why it's happening, it's now all tied up in contracts to such an extent it can't be unpicked, apparently. Certainly work is going on to see what can be unpicked. To the extent that I suspect in my constituency we will be relying on 5G, that fibre is not going to get there, and the fibre that is getting there, if you look on the data, sorry, I'm under attack outside, the fibre that is reaching my patch is not actually a wholesale offering. So whilst we look like we've got quite a lot of fibre coming through, it's actually only one private company, and therefore the take-up is very, very low, because we obviously, when we get onto skills, we have a slightly older population. Our digital skills are low because we've had such poor connectivity up until this point. And my real concern is that sort of final 15%, that I know we're in the final phase of the BDUK rollout, and that by the time that's actually commissioned, what seems to happen is that the work's commissioned, but it's not delivered for so many years afterwards, that almost anything could have happened with the commercial rollout in that period, leaving this overlap. So there's a lot of work to do in my mind, and I guess I'm just beyond frustrated that we're not moving faster. But I would like to reassure people that there is a private offering, so if you're desperate for gigabit, it is going past more houses now than it was.
And Selene, just as a quick follow-up then, from rural businesses as well, I imagine there's a high degree of frustration. So you've seen this not just from the residential aspect, but from the commercial aspect and what that means for SMEs too.
Certainly, when I was first elected, it came up everywhere. Everywhere I went, it was what's happening. Some rural parts have been connected up. Actually, that Openreach have done a number of villages, and that has helped quite a lot. So, and I think where we have businesses, if they want to use the private company going through, which doesn't have the wholesale option on it, I think they're much more inclined to, if they need that gigabit connection, that they're far more likely to take it up. But again, it depends how small. Obviously, with rural companies, a lot of them can be very small out in the countryside, and their digital skills, if you've lived somewhere where you've had virtually no broadband and no connectivity, I mean, I still get cut off on my mobile phone when I move my head in my house. It's quite hard to envisage why you would learn anything else about how to use the thing if it takes, you spend your life looking at the circle of doom, as children in many schools in my patch still describe to me. So we don't still have our schools connected, but I haven't had as many businesses recently. We did have a whole surge in the middle of Barnstaple, but we were able to pin that down. And I think this is I feel I'm literally connecting up properties one by one, that they have to come to me with a problem, and I have to then go and take it to somebody at Openreach or BDUK to fix it. And my fear is that it's a lot of properties and businesses that probably don't have the time to contact their MP. And their MP doesn't have the access that I do to yourself. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that's great, Selene. Thank you. I'm going to turn to Anna next, and thinking about digital infrastructure, obviously from a rural area, what this means from a business. Anna, you run a business, and how does this impact on not just your business, but the communities that you serve as well, and the others that you serve?
Well, funnily you should say that, actually. My business partner, who is also my husband, spent most of Sunday sat in our office waiting for us to be reconnected, because it's so important. So we obviously, working with data, we have high degrees of security here, and we need to make sure that the team are logging on via VPN, so that they may work from wherever and work remotely. And we've all learned how to do that recently, haven't we? But in order to get access to some of the tooling and systems that we use, we have to log in via the office. And if we don't have Wi-Fi to the office, then that can't work. So it's absolutely critical from our perspective that we have good connectivity here in the office, and last week we didn't, so we do have a backup system obviously, but I just think we're very fortunate to be in the city centre where we are extremely well served. I do think that a number of our team members are working from all over the country and some from abroad at the moment, and it's only made possible by good broadband connectivity to allow them to be able to do the work that they do. So if there isn't good connectivity out to various parts of the UK, they will struggle to be able to work from those areas and have access to some of the opportunities that people who are well served by good broadband and good connectivity have. So when we move on to skills later, I do think it's a key issue for if you can't have access to those jobs because you can't get connectivity into the office and work with the team, then that's going to be a real problem.
And is 2030 fast enough?
No, absolutely not. No, we need it last week, not in 8 years' time. We're in the tech sector, we're absolutely crying out for new talent. We're crying out for new skills, and every day, digital and tech is actually becoming a bigger issue for every organisation. It isn't just the tech sector, and we need more people, we need more skills, we need people to have access to be able to work in this sector now, and waiting for 15% of the population to have connectivity for another 8 years is madness, really, when we need it now. We need to drive productivity through and generate productivity in all areas of the UK.
Thank you, Anna. So Blake, you're hearing there from Anna, as a business saying rocket boosters behind this, we need it even quicker. Selene saying from an MP's perspective, particularly rural areas, need it quicker. Come to you and for your observations on this.
Thanks very much. So we definitely recognise that infrastructure is a critical part of the digital strategy. So the kind of growth that we expect to see across the whole of the UK, you mentioned kind of London Tech Week, and obviously historically London and the South East have benefited from this huge growth of the tech economy, but we're seeing clusters emerge across the whole of the UK, and infrastructure is a really important precursor to that. And I definitely hear all of those concerns, both from Anna and Selene. I guess one of the things that is worth pointing out is obviously we recognise that technology is also moving. So kind of wireless technology, and the strategy makes clear that our expectation to have sort of 92% coverage of good 4G wireless. And we're also making huge investments in terms of the £200 million investment the government made in 5G testbeds and trials, and the £250 million investment in R&D around new types of infrastructure. So definitely take the point. Worth saying that obviously whenever we have hit targets in the past, so 2030 is a long way up, we have other target dates, and the existing 5G target, which was the majority of the population to have access to 5G by 2027, was actually met 5 years early. So perhaps that gives some hope on the horizon that we might get there earlier than others would hope.
I'm not going to make you promise to do it 5 years earlier today. Like, I wouldn't do that to you. But I think that's really useful, and actually that R&D investment as well that's going into infrastructure and what that means for different parts of the country, because we know that not every area of the UK is the same. Sheila, I want to bring you in at this point and get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't agree more with my fellow panelists about the fact that we need it yesterday, not in 2030. And, we're way behind other countries in the world, Canada, Spain, Portugal, to name but a few. I would say America, because it's such a massive country. We can't compare ourselves to there, but we are way behind. And it's great that the government is focusing on bringing opportunities to areas, but 2030 does seem a long way off. The 5 billion that the government are putting towards Project Gigabit to bring gigabit capability broadband to 85% of the UK by 2025 will certainly help. With the 1 billion shared rural network deal with mobile operators delivering 4G coverage to 95% of the UK by 2025. People, Selene mentioned about living in Devon, and people in rural areas, they they will reap the rewards when that happens. But again, it's a long way off. Now, Celine lives in Devon. Well, I live in the Highlands, and although we're only 8 miles from Perth, you can feel really cut off when you don't have any mobile phone or internet signal. And in fact, we've privately put in microwave technology powered by photovoltaic, but that was a huge expense to provide connectivity to a very small area. So it's not something that you can really do at scale. And most jobs now require a level of digital literacy. And with remote working becoming popular, we can only do that if we have connectivity. And at FDM, the company that I've been helping run for the last 30 years, we recruited over 2,500 new joiners into our company last year alone. And 100 of them came from the most deprived areas of the UK. And this is not enough. We recognise that there's plenty of talent in the UK, but there's a complete lack of skills. And if we can't reach more people within those areas, then we're missing out on a huge talent pool. Now, the reason that we have only been able to recruit 100, although it's a significant number, but not as a percentage of the total number of joiners, it's because the training that we provide, where before it was classroom based in major cities in the UK, when the pandemic hit us and we all had to work remotely, then our training became remote. Now that was good, bad, good. Good because we can reach many more people and it supports the government's levelling up agenda, but it's not so good if those people don't have connectivity. Now, we have a huge skills deficit and we need to be able to offer jobs to people living in all areas of the country. So we need to act now if we want to reduce the skills deficit. The tech industry is the fastest growing industry in the United Kingdom, and the country is facing a massive skills shortage across the board. So digital skills gap is a problem. In fact, it's a crisis that we need to get to grips with, if otherwise there'll be significant repercussions for the economy.
Sheila, I'm listening to what you said and what other panelists have said there as well, and this is a bit open to the other panel to chip in at this point. We've got different forms of levelling up in different parts of the UK. It's already what I'm starting to hear. So for some people, this is about digital infrastructure levelling up and being able to be connected. It isn't a lack of skills and desire. It's that you could do this, but the infrastructure isn't there. For others, and I think we're coming onto a skills question in a minute, and I'll come to you first on that, Sheila, as well. But for others, actually, it's the skills to do it. Digital infrastructure is great in their part of the world. They just literally do not have the skills to be able to get online and access it and ensure they've got those jobs and that resilience. Is that what I'm hearing, Sheila, from you?
Yeah, you absolutely are, Matt. The pandemic accelerated the need for digital transformation. And one of the challenges that this has brought to organizations is how to attract and retain talent. And business leaders are identifying the skills gaps in technical talent, and it's a major challenge to meet those their own digital transformation goals. Talent and expertise are a finite resource, and without the right teams in place, IT projects will either slow down or they'll just come to a standstill. And you've heard it many times, there is a war on talent, and there really, truly is. So going forward, I think there's a growing need for an ecosystem of partnerships to tackle these people challenges and to generate the flexibilities that employers need to be successful. Now, the government's proposed investment into skills, I believe, I'm sure Blake can confirm this, £3.8 billion by 2025 is much needed. And again, we need that now. If we're going to close the skills gap, digital skills, I said it in the last question, I'll say it again, has to be available to everyone. Now, there's tons and tons of courses out there, and there's a multitude of providers. The Institute of Coding is one that's government funded, but signposting is a problem. People don't know where to look for these courses. So we need to address signposting, and we need to bring the community of providers together so that there's a central go-to place to make it easy for people. Now, FDM, we are a skills provider. We get in the region of 75,000 applications a year for 2,500 places, and that's on our programme. And our training is tech skills accredited. That's the kite mark of the industry. It's a fairly new kite mark available to organisations, but I think it's really important to make sure that the training that's going to be offered or that is offered out there to the wider community has value to it. I also think apprenticeships is the new way forward. I know apprenticeships are old school, but they've kind of been reintroduced in recent years. And, you know, it's such a positive initiative. And, you know, I think it's going to be growing rapidly. And, you know, organisations now are opening their doors to more apprentices than ever before, because there's a finite number of graduates out there. The Levelling Up white paper suggests that by 2030, the number of people successfully completing high quality skills training will have significantly increased in every area of the UK. And in England, this will lead to 200,000 more people successfully completing high quality skills training annually. We must remember that the tech industry has a growing skills gap, and we have to do what we can right now to plug it. You know, there's all sorts of statistics out there. I've been reading them till the cows come home recently. But the sad fact is there are more jobs than there are people. I think in the last quarter of last year, there were more than 64,000 vacancies for UK tech jobs. That was from a British Computer Society report at the end of Q3. I think that's probably enough for me for now, Nat.
I think it's quite timely that you raise some of those statistics, because we've seen ONS figures that published today, actually looking at not just unemployment figures, but the growing sectors and the growing industry. And we know that the tech industry is growing. But I guess bringing Blake in here, you know, thinking for many jobs, actually digital skills are a prerequisite. There is, you know, no other way around it. And for a significant group, that sort of job is out of reach still. So how do we ensure levelling up means that people have those skills and they can access those opportunities?
Yeah, certainly, Matt. And much like Elaine's comment about hearing about infrastructure on the doorstep, I guess when I started this job 18 months ago, the consistent message has always been about skills and access to talent from all the businesses that I speak to. So we definitely know that this is kind of central to the challenges, both of the kind of future, but also today. So one of the things that we often talk about is that if you think about the workforce of 2030, say, 80% of that workforce is currently already in work today. And so it is a completely different challenge than perhaps the one that we faced before. It's quite a different cultural shift to think about how we invest in continually the kind of upskilling of people. So not just kind of relying on people coming out of school with qualifications and going into work, and then that's it, that's the sort of job done. And actually what we've seen is a tailing off of investment by industry in these kind of skills, which I think is one of the things that we were hoping Sheila and others who are joining us on the Digital Skills Council can help us to really understand why that's happening and what can we do about that, because I think it will be a public-private partnership if we're going to solve some of these big challenges. I mean, the interesting stuff, Sheila's mentioned some of the figures, but obviously we also see that there are huge openings and growing openings for digital occupations. And I say digital occupations because I think sometimes people think that these are only tech jobs. They're not. They're all jobs. They're jobs whether they're in banking, whether they're in agriculture. These are all jobs that are going to require some kind of digital upskilling. And so what we are seeing is those jobs are now growing in areas of the country like Preston, in Edinburgh. So outside of where we might normally expect the kind of central big sort of cities. So I do think it is a really big challenge. There are other sort of really difficult challenges. Sheila mentioned the crowded landscape of digital skills provision. So even if people had the time, they're not always sure which course that they should do. But also there are really difficult challenges around the low awareness of digital roles and how people get into them. And I think there's also cultural perceptions, and again, Sheila might want to talk about this, which is often people see digital jobs as sitting at a computer coding, and actually digital jobs, as I said, are all sorts of jobs. So how do we get people more motivated and interested in a career that requires these kind of skills? Because actually these jobs, often our data shows, are more highly paid and actually more resilient to change. So there are good reasons why digital occupations and those occupations of the future are things we should be investing in, both as I said, the public sector, but also the private sector investing more in upskilling of the current workforce.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like, we're seeing that steady growth in digital jobs. It's year on year that's coming through. Anna, I want to bring you in at this point. Sheila before said, you know, if you can see it, you can be it. And then Blake was talking about getting away from this perception of tech jobs being somebody sat at a computer coding all day. I want to get your experience of this from the business perspective. What does it mean in terms of skills, in terms of how you recruit as well?
So, I mean, I couldn't agree with Blake more in terms of the fact we have a perception problem in tech, in terms of what a tech role actually looks like and what it actually means. I mean, I can't write a line of code, and if you ever do see me writing code, you should definitely run as fast as you can in the opposite direction, because it means something's gone very wrong. And a number of my team are not engineers. I mean, we do have a large chunk of engineers here who write code, and they do sit at computers for relatively long hours writing code, and that is part of some jobs in tech. But I do think we have got quite a big language barrier and entry barrier into the tech world in terms of misconceptions and what people think that a job in tech actually looks like. And we do have a job to do as the tech sector and businesses in the tech sector to start kind of busting those myths and making it more accessible to people from all walks of life. I think there's a huge swathe of some of the older generation who absolutely we would love to see coming into the tech sector and be cross-skilled and brought in with all the experiences that they have from various other industries to really add layers of richness into the tech sector. We are relatively diverse, but I do think that age diversity is a big problem in tech, and I'd love to see how we try and bring those kind of upskilling into that older workforce, to bring them into the tech sector and allow them to have that flexible working lifestyle that quite a lot of tech roles actually offer now. So yeah, there's all sorts to do. We join the clamour of yes, there is a massive skills shortage. We are struggling massively in Leeds. I'm sure it's no different anywhere else. I mean, the 64,000 open roles is a wonderful problem. It means that there's a huge amount of opportunity there for people to take them. We just need to make sure that we're getting the skills out to them to allow them to come in and get access to these well-paid jobs. It's one of the reasons why we've set up our own academy at the Shed, and we're working with boot camps in the north to actually help upskill and bring people from all walks of life into the tech sector.
And I think that diversity of talent is really important. I was talking with a business based in the West Midlands the other day, and they were retraining ex-forces personnel who were coming in because they had the skills from a leadership background, understanding crisis management as well, to be able to deliver on projects for the tech sector. And actually, code wasn't a prerequisite. And I just want to get your take again, Anna, before I move to Selene. You know, are you seeing that? Are people hungry for those opportunities to do it, or is it that they're seeing us just too distant? It's a job too far almost. I
mean, I'm not working on the ground with some of the boot camps, but from what I'm hearing from the people who are absolutely, they are finding whole swathes of people who are really keen to take advantage of the opportunity that the tech sector offers. And one of the things I would love to do is do more with the armed forces, because we've got a couple of ex-armed forces here at the Shed, and I completely agree with the sentiment that, you know, they come with all the leadership skills and the learning, and they know how to learn, and they know how to train, and they know how to manage. We can teach people to code. We can't teach people to, you know, some of these life skills that are so important. So yes, lots of people, there's lots of keenness. It's just making sure, like Sheila said, you know, that we're signposting people in the right direction to the right kind of course for that mixes with their skill and their capability.
I'm going to bring Selene in here, and I'm going to put my neck on the line and say a teacher or a former teacher is going to say that skills are very important. But Selene.
I think they are, but I think there is a real gap between what goes on in school and what the sector needs. And there's a real disjoint. And when I visit businesses in my patch, and I was, you know, teaching literally just in Northern Devon when I was elected, I had no idea these businesses were there. So there's these incredible engineering businesses in my constituency, and yet as a teacher, where I was taking the occasional careers session, I had no idea they were there. And I think it's that we need to find a way of bridging that gap. Up in Blythe, they have a fantastic STEM hub right on the port, where businesses are actually training teachers as well as youngsters with the skills that they need for the next generation. And I think we have a real challenge in that so many other skills in life you learn from your parents. And in a constituency like mine, where we know that we haven't had broadband, therefore most of the parents aren't going to have great digital skills. That is something of a sweeping statement, because some are obviously fantastic, but there is a gap there. And so how are young people coming up going to learn those skills if they haven't really learned them at school and their parents can't help them? And I think we need to be much better at communicating. And I'd very much like to, and if anyone on this call can make this happen for me, because I don't have enough time to do it, some sort of careers service which is actually digital itself, and that local companies for each local school should produce a video that shows what goes on there. Because I think far too many youngsters still think engineers are going to actually fix your car, and there's so much more to that. And that how do we actually make sure to help and support teachers who are already incredibly busy imparting skills knowledge to those students? You know, but the world has changed very much since textbooks, and obviously so much of school is moving online and has had to during the pandemic, but it's still a very different style of learning to actually the work that's going on the outside. And I think if you could bring that to life for youngsters at a much earlier age, because we do careers more like year 9. I'd like to see my little maths students, when they came year 7, over half the class, maths was their favourite subject. By the time we got to year 9, most of them didn't want to do it. And so we sort of lost them somewhere in those 2 years. But if we could bring to life that these skills could open the door to, you know, like in my patch, you can go and find a Russian submarine with a piece of fibre that you throw out the back of a ship. Yeah, there are so many great skills out there that need jobs out there that use these skills. But we need to inspire that next generation. The older generation, I think, is much harder, because the younger generation that knows how to do this knows so much more. I mean, even when I find some of my young team trying to explain to me what I'm supposed to be doing, yeah, because I think it's almost an exploratory skill until you actually learn something specific like coding. The whole being happy and able to access things on your phone or your computer. You know, when I watch my parents trying to get to grips with an iPad, you can, they won't be joining the workforce anytime soon. I'm sure I'd be delighted to know. But it's a very interesting sort of observation in terms of that actually this isn't a skill that's as easy to learn. And if you've managed to get to a certain point in your life without having it, I think we need to find different ways to actually engage with people.
And I think that technology moving so quickly as well, a generation being comfortable with that and constant change, not just in the technology, but in the roles as well there. So a big call for Selene. So if people are watching and people have got that career service, please get in touch with Selene. I'm absolutely certain she'll be delighted to hear from you as well. And I just want to pose another quick question to the panel. It's very open for anybody to jump in here. I focused on more advanced digital skills too, because I think we can start to look at digital and what this means on a basic level. Sometimes people being able to access services and provision, and that's incredibly important. But actually, is there more we need to be doing with universities in terms of spin outs of universities, in terms of those startups as well? Sheila, I know you do a huge amount with the universities. I think it's pretty appropriate I come to you first here.
Okay, yeah, thank you. In fact, I maybe just want to address a point that was made earlier. I think it was by Anna. That, you know, Anna mentioned about up in Leeds, you know, about the Ex-Forces programme. Well, we've actually had an Ex-Forces programme running for many years, and we have introduced hundreds and hundreds of Ex-Forces into the tech sector coming out of all of the armed forces. And they are brilliant project managers, programme managers, people from the Royal Engineers, the Signals. There's a whole demographic out there that's is pretty much untapped, and businesses have been able to benefit through our Ex-Forces programme. Now, another demographic that's really quite untapped is the returners, and these are both of these groups of people. They are folks who have been, I suppose, embracing more advanced technologies because they're experienced. You know, returners, typically women, but not exclusively women, people who've gone off perhaps to have their families, taking many years out of the workplace, people who've had to take time out for to attend to caring responsibilities. You know, these people come with huge amounts of experience, both in life and in industry, and getting them back into the workplace is, I think it's critical. So we're not just talking about graduates and apprentices here. We're talking about, and again, we mentioned age earlier. Well, you know, there's plenty of people in our organisation who are either over or at state retirement age, and they are doing a fine job and adding huge value to the tech industry. So I just wanted to really make mention of those groups of people that I'd like to see other organisations really considering when they're looking to fill their vacancies.
I think it's that sort of Liverpool Football Club mantra, isn't it? You know, if you're good enough, you're old enough, and that's it. Age shouldn't be a barrier in this either.
Old is gold.
Well, that's the quote from today. Yeah, I'm going to take a slight spin on this because I think we could do a whole day on digital skills and start to think about actually data, because I know when techUK did our local digital capital index in 2021, and we'll be doing that again in 2022, and more details will be published in the next couple of weeks about that that publication, that conference. But one of the things we found was a lack of good data being available, and the quality of regional data as well to understand our ecosystems. And so we need to improve how we collect it, how we unlock the power of data and its value across the entire economy as well. So how can levelling up improve people's understandings of their own data? Also, how can government, public sector bodies, businesses improve their use of data as well? And I'm going to come to Anna first here, if I may.
Yeah, it's a very big question. And I think I have had a look at the local digital capital index, and obviously you're looking at quite big regions there. And I think one of the key things about levelling up is that it really does need the granularity of data to really track the impact across much smaller areas. I mean, having read the levelling up document last night, it's quite clear that, you know, within those very large regions, there are huge disparities between those that have and those that have not. And being able to understand kind of the small shifts in very small locations is imperative in terms of understanding the impacts that the investment of time and money that is going into this levelling up agenda is actually having on local communities. That being said, getting access to that data, as you've obviously found, is almost impossible. Obviously, data is collected by all sorts of different organisations across the UK, and I mean, we work with businesses in the main, and even SMEs are struggling in terms of understanding what data they should collect, what it should be telling them, and what questions it answers. So in order to drive a coordinated data gathering exercise and be able to provide the right level of data in order to answer some of these questions is a very difficult task. And I think, you know, understanding clearly what we want to understand and what data needs to drive that answer, and then figuring out how we have a consistent approach to gathering that data across all of the different local authorities in the UK is going to take a really concerted effort from central government, I would say, in terms of determining what they need to know and how they're going to measure it. And I'm glad that it's not my job, because that's a really difficult task.
It's a huge task as well. And Anna, from your experience of, you know, working with data locally as well, have you found that local authorities are interested in this and making data much more user-friendly and accessible, or is it too big a job? It needs that central coordination.
No, well, bearing in mind that my experience is mainly with Leeds City Council, who are incredibly progressive, I would say, as a body. I had a conversation with them a few months ago, and I think that COVID in particular, and the pandemic, and having to drive very quick decisions and very detailed decisions in terms of where to put money, time and effort in terms of driving individual responses in very small sections of the region has absolutely accelerated data understanding, collection and driving insight across the board, not just in Leeds City Council, but, you know, in all walks of life, business and the public sector. So I do think that the pandemic has a really accelerated understanding of how data can really empower quick and impactful decision making. And I think that as a result, therefore, we are seeing a shift in terms of understanding the power of data, and therefore what else can be done with it. Now we're hopefully coming out of the other side.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Sheila, Michael Gove's made a big play in the Levelling Up documents and the white paper about actually collecting data, and this data being used and being data driven. So how can government, public bodies and business use data to improve, this data to improve what they do and improve service delivery as well?
Yeah, I think they have to make more publicly accessible, more location-specific data on the strengths of the regional data ecosystems. We need to, again, I perhaps might be repeating what Anna's said very eloquently, but we need to make better data-based decisions, and also by having better data and interrogating that data, it also offers reinforcement when requesting investment in regional digital economies as part of that levelling up agenda. But again, I'm going to go back now to skills. The estimated supply of data scientists from UK universities is unlikely to be more than 10,000 people per annum. So it's, we've got limited resource there to manipulate this data. And because we're such a data-rich country, it's no surprise that data management, business intelligence skills are in huge demand at this moment in time in this country, or everywhere, in fact, in all countries, and they're in very short supply. So it goes right back to skills. We need the skills in order to be able to manage the data and do something sensible with it, make good database decisions.
The people with the understanding of data, so investing that skills, gathering the data, micro level, making sure we're acting on it and driving investment decisions on the back of that.
Exactly.
I have to come to a maths teacher next then to ask about data, because Selene, you must have an interest in this and how we use data to improve public services as well.
I think one of my concerns with the data that we use is the lack of granularity on it, and that people may have heard me speak in the House and explain averages and variance to the Secretary of State, because when your county is the size of Devon, which actually as a landmass is just about the same size as inside the M25, yet we only have 1.2 million people live there. What happens in the south of Devon is very different to what happens in my constituency in the north, to give just one example. And I think the risk of using data in the format so much of it comes is that we do look at an average, and that therefore in constituencies the size of mine, when I talk about levelling up, what we need in the north is often quite different to what the south looks like, and we're at the moment the data is just not there, even on your own excellent capital index, Matt, that the Southwest, when it talks about skills, includes Bristol, and Bristol in my mind is a very different proposition to rural North Devon. And I think we do need to find better ways to understand what's going on outside of cities, which obviously are always going to skew averages, if anything's based on population level. So I think it's very, very powerful, but I do think we need to look at the caveats on it, and I think there is a real risk of using averages over too wide sort of area, because it does hide a multitude of sins. And I think we are starting out. My concern, I was with the Levelling Up Minister yesterday speaking about how do we ensure that Levelling Up does reach market towns and coastal communities that are that much smaller, because my nearest city is 65 miles away from my house, and it's not getting any closer however good we get at Levelling Up.
And I think it's that that focus on levelling up for all as well, and using data to drive that. So actually your communities in North Devon, you mentioned Barnstable, Selene, they will have very different needs from other areas, and gathering data and using it in the right way and making sure that that drives investment as well, as we come through it. And it only feels appropriate to bring you in, Blake, here when we start to talk about this use of data and getting the policies right and getting the gathering right to drive investment and decisions. So are we doing that right at the moment? Are we on the right track?
So we obviously announced in the Queen's speech that we'll be bringing forward a data protection bill, which I think will see a greater focus on how we create a kind of pro-growth, pro-innovation regime, and the details of that, including our proposals, will be out shortly. So I do think government recognises that as you say, it's about making the most of the opportunity of data, and the digital strategy talks about just one of the examples of, for example, when Transport for London published its data and the effect that had in terms of reducing commute times and like spurring innovation in customer-facing services that could then use that data. So there is huge power in data, totally agree. I wanted to circle back though to something that Sheila mentioned and that you mentioned about advanced skills, because I think that one of the things that I'm most proud of in terms of my portfolio is the work that we did to launch the AI and data conversion courses in 28 universities now across the country. But not only that, actually we funded scholarship places in the first round for up to 1,000 students to convert from other courses that perhaps history courses or social sciences, to then go and do an AI and data conversion course, a bit like you would do a law conversion. But we also focused that on, and we haven't perhaps talked about this very much yet, those groups are perhaps underrepresented in both our sector and more generally. So 76% of the scholarships that we've currently funded have gone to women, 45% of the scholarships to Black students, 24 to students with disabilities. And I think that's an incredibly important area that we have to focus on is more diversity in the skills base if we're going to make the most of data, because also particularly where I come from in AI, we talk about bias, and so we have to think about where that data comes from and whose data we're using, so that these new innovations really are reflective of all of the communities that we serve. The big plug I would make is obviously we announced funding to double the number of scholarships, but we said that we'd like industry to help us get to that sort of doubling, and hoping that industry will come behind us and fund just 500 of those scholarships in the next round. So if people are interested in that, please do get in touch.
Please do. Yeah, I will make sure any businesses who are interested in this, who are watching, finding out, can get in touch with Blake and the department on this as well. I think getting that diversity in the sector, not just in terms of new recruits, but those who are using and accessing tech, I think is ever so important as well. Blake, details on that scheme on the website at the moment, on DCMS's website.
Yeah, or the Office for Students, who acts as the delivery partner for us.
Perfect. We'll make sure that that's shared and that's available to everybody as well. Definitely. Yeah. Perfect. As we start to come to the close of our session, it would be remiss of me to not talk about levelling up in terms of place-based as well. So we know it's London Tech Week, and I said at the start of this conversation that means tech isn't all about London; it's about the whole of the UK. But levelling up as a place-based focus on areas outside of the capital generally. So we have to ask ourselves, what does levelling up mean for the UK, and what does levelling up mean for London? Are they mutually exclusive? Are they different? I'm going to keep the conversation going with Blake here at this point.
Thanks very much. So you asked, what does it mean? I think for me, it's about long-term prosperity being spread more evenly across the country. And I think I talked about historically the sort of digital occupations being really focused on London and the South East. And the strategy that we launched yesterday has three kind of main components: ideas, which is about the kind of innovation and entrepreneurship, the people, we've already talked about skills, and investment, and we've talked about infrastructure. But I guess one of the things that we also need to recognize is that investment is, for example, the amount of VC funding that we see, which it's hard, I mean, it's growing, but it's still dwarfed by the amount of VC investment in tech that we see in London and the South East. And so there is still more sort of to go. But I guess one of the things that gives me sort of confidence and hope is that the work that we did on regional ecosystems, which showed that particularly from the kind of ideas space, that there are these great companies, the work that the UK Tech Cluster Group has done to kind of showcase this work, which is there's these amazing companies all across the UK, these hubs that are being created, whether it's in fintech or artificial intelligence or any of these other big data in the Midlands, for example. So I think that there's this huge potential, and we just have to find a way to unleash it. And I think that the tenets of the digital strategy applied in a local context will help us get there. And I think it's a good news story for the whole of the UK. It's not just, it's a great story locally, but it's a great story for the whole of the UK. So I think our analysis showed that if we, so if you look at regions that have more than 100 high growth businesses, the average GVA per person is £138,000. You compare that to a similar region with less than 100 high growth businesses, it's only £22,000. So it's like good for the whole economy, but it's good for the local economy as well.
So investment in Lincoln doesn't mean that London loses out. That's what you're saying here.
No, I think it's a good story for the whole of the UK. If we had investment, we could grow 41.5 billion into the economy by 2025, and we'd be creating in the same breath 678,000 new jobs across the country as a whole. So I think it's a great news story wherever you are in the UK.
Thank you. Thanks, Blake. I'm going to come to Selene here because obviously as an MP representing an area outside of London, down in the southwest, you have a particular interest in this and what levelling up means for your area, but you'll see it in terms of London as well as an MP. So just want to get your take.
I think in my mind, levelling up in a rural constituency is quite different. We don't have the same huge infrastructure asks. And I think it does come back to understanding how some of the policies nationally roll out at a local level, and I think we have a real concern that many of the decisions are taken based on sort of the number of people that will be impacted by that policy and that investment, which ultimately means that we constantly get left behind on some of the levelling up money because there aren't many people in my constituency, relatively speaking. For example, completely non-tech one, but my county council put in for a part of my Tarka Trail cycling track, and it was their number 2 project out of 6 projects they submitted to the Department of Transport because they ranked it as the second most important thing in Devon to get fixed in active travel. Yet the Department of Transport rejected it outright, and the other 5 were all built, all in Exeter. And I think these are the kind of decisions that happen time and time again. And we need to find a different way of looking at rurality, because sometimes it is going to cost more, but we are increasingly left behind on things like broadband, mobile connectivity, infrastructure, road network, active travel. And I think there are real issues in terms of, we have a lovely rural way of life. No, people in my patch don't really complain about living there. It's fantastic. But how do we make sure that we keep up with our city counterparts? And that's not always huge infrastructure projects and huge amounts of money. But whilst we don't have access to things, I think that does make it more difficult. So I'd never begrudge investment into London, into those other cities, because, they are driving our economic success and, they're vital to our economic future. I think we just need to find a way of making sure that rural Britain does not get left behind whilst driving forward in other areas.
That balance that needs to be struck there as well. Yeah. Sheila, bring you in, and it's levelling up. You've got offices in Glasgow as well. You've got offices all across the UK as FDM, but you're a proud Scot too as well. Is it that we need to be investing north of the border, getting away from all this investment down in London?
Yeah, in fact, I see myself as a global citizen, Matt. Of course, yes is the answer to that question. I see levelling up as opportunities and equality for everyone, regardless of where they live. But I am actually delighted that the government, civil service, is moving a department to East Kilbride, just outside of Glasgow, and also to Wolverhampton, where my husband's from. I think the civil service, they need a solid knowledge of what's going on outside of the capital. But since this is London Tech Week, I also wanted to mention London, because London is a hugely diverse city, and it's one of the few globalized cities on the planet. It compares well with New York, with Tokyo, with Paris, but it's far from being inclusive and racially equal, and social mobility in London is not equal. There's a huge job of levelling up to be done in the city. So I know we're talking about the south of England and the north of Scotland, but we mustn't forget London as well, because Tower Hamlets is probably the area of greatest deprivation in London. And then we all know about Grenfell Towers, and that sits within the borough of Kensington and Chelsea. And perhaps outsiders might not realise there's huge deprivation in London as well. So the capital's digital infrastructure needs to be upgraded to improve our global competitiveness, and we mustn't leave the deprived areas of London behind.
It's making sure that we're actually breaking down London as well, and having those conversations about the out of reach communities in London too. Yeah. Anna, I'm bring you in for the final comment from our panel.
I'll be super quick as well because of time. I just want to say that, you know, as a city and as a country, I think we've all massively benefited from London on the global stage. You know, London has added huge value to this country in terms of bringing in money and finance and investment and skills. And I think, you know, just because levelling up is existing, what it does is it allows us to connect into London and make that tech ecosystem much larger, and London can benefit from the skills that exist in the north. I've seen at least 2 of my staff leave to work remotely for London businesses over the last 18 months, and I think, you know, we all get better together, and I think that's really important. So the investment coming out from levelling up means that we all level up together, and London doesn't suffer because of that. London actually gets to benefit from a much wider ecosystem that it can then be part of.
I think that's a great place to be closing. London benefits, the country benefits, and the high tide, all the ships rise. So thank you so much to our panel, to Anna, Sheila, Selene, and Blake for taking the time to talk with us. London Tech Week, there are a raft of other events, courses, speakers, panels, things going on for London Tech Week. Do tune in. techUK is delivering a lot of them. Please check our London Tech Week hub out and join us for some other sessions through this week, but also through the rest of 2022 as well. Leaves me to wish everybody a great Tuesday and enjoy the rest of London Tech Week. Thank you.